Welcome to the Claims Underground podcast with your hosts, Corey Locke and Troy Willis, where we help policyholders just like you understand your policy and how to navigate through an insurance claim. We advocate for homeowners as well as businesses when insurance companies won't pay. So if you're tired of getting the runaround and ready to find out what's really going on, then let's get down to business and learn from the insurance claims experts, Corey Locke and Troy Willis.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Claims Underground. This is a podcast show with my co-host, Corey Locke. We have a special guest today, Kyle Herndon from Scientific Restoration Specialists Incorporated. Kyle Herndon is one of the best that I've seen in this business when it comes to mitigation and knowing his stuff. So we brought him on the show today so he can actually educate our viewers and our policyholders about what their responsibilities are and how they check for certifications and things of that nature that mitigators need in order to perform the tasks they do during an insurance loss. So start by introducing myself again. I am Troy Willis. I'm a licensed public adjuster. I am a certified umpire and appraiser. I am also a retired builder, and I also have certifications at IRCRC. My co-host, Corey Locke. Please, Corey, tell the viewers about yourself.
Welcome all back. This is Corey Locke, host also with Troy. 35 years as an adjuster, 30 years as a property estimator. I'm an expert witness. Also, I am triple mastered IICRC, also ACAC Smoke and Fire consultant. And today we're very excited for Kyle to be with us, Kyle Herndon. Kyle and I attended classes together with IICRC, and that's how I got to know him. And he's a super mitigator out of Southern California, and we are so happy. Kyle, please introduce yourself to the Claims Underground.
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Herndon. I started in this industry when I was 14 years old. With Carl Williams was the first certification that I had gotten. And over the years, I just grew, started my own company at about 18, 19 years old. Kind of faked the funk, trying to figure out, what avenue to go. We did carpet cleanings and things like that. And then kind of found our niche. So
Yeah. I was going to ask, I don't think that many people understand what the term mitigator is. And I think I wanted to start with that. Can you just give a quick understanding for people who are watching and don't know the term? What is a mitigator?
You're preventing any further damages.
Okay. And that's for what kind of, is that water? Or is that just exclusively water?
Whatever the peril is, really.
Okay.
You've got a water damage. Obviously, you're going to try to prevent any kind of secondary damage and perform any kind of restorative methods. But the same thing goes with any kind of peril. You're bringing it to a pre-loss condition.
So it could be mold, water, fire, smoke, anything that's affecting and changing what was the atmosphere or the conditions of the home, inside, outside. It's a change in what was the condition of the home. Am I close to what that is?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
I think I might have cut you off. You're triple mastered and as a IICRC certified mitigator, but you're also an instructor, and you do that training. You train others to be certified. Are you still doing the training?
No, not really. I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy.
Okay. But that's something you've done as an expert and as a trainer. You've trained people in classes for certification. So you would know what this is. This is not something that you're unfamiliar with.
Yeah, correct. For a while, I was going into a lot of restoration contractors' company, and I would completely revamp it. Go in there and basically start the process all over again, get them back to the basics and say, hey, look, this is what worked for me. This is what I'd recommend. And with that education kind of came with, hey, these are the certifications I would suggest you guys get, whether it's the owner, the contractor, project managers, or even the helper.
Now you do more than just the structure. You're also involved with the content side.
Correct. Yes.
Can you give us a little rundown of, your contents, the requirements of a mitigator that handles contents? What do they need to know? What do they need to be, what would someone need to be looking for to understand whether someone's competent or not for contents?
Um, I think the biggest thing is certifications, having that knowledge and that background of experience. I can tell you firsthand, um, we ruined so many things by trial and error, and
Mhm.
there wasn't a class then. We're talking 15 years ago.
Right.
There wasn't any kind of standards. There was no classes that anyone kind of held. So now that there is classes that are offered, I think that that's going to help a lot of people. But primarily, the most important thing is someone that's knowledgeable. I mean, you can kind of get that understanding from somebody like a contractor almost right away, um, just in regular conversation with them.
Now you have some high tech stuff that you were gracious enough to show me your warehouse, what you do. Can you give us kind of a rundown of the more specialized training and equipment you use for contents? And I could say you have an Esporta machine, you have a fire line, you also have a distilled water shower for larger equipment. What is all of that that I just listed off?
Um, so the Esporta machine was originally created in Canada for turnouts, fireman turnouts, and then it was tailored to hockey gear. Um, and then we adopted it into our industry, um, and it was tested and basically vouched for trauma, mold, sewage. We'll do ATP testing before and after on a batch of maybe clothes. But the way that it was sold to us was if you took a house, cut the ceiling and the roof out, flipped it upside down, whatever broke, that's hard goods. Whatever didn't break was soft goods. If it's a soft goods, you could stick it in that machine, whether it's a um, stuffed animal or a $30,000 purse. Um, so yeah, that machine has really given us not only the capability of doing things where we would normally have to sub out, but it came with a lot of wealthy knowledge. Again, it's the sauce, not the service, right? It's not the equipment itself. Every one of these things that we invested in, it was the intellectual property, the knowledge that and the training that came with it that gave you more of an understanding. And you'd go, oh, honestly, Corey, I don't need this machine, because the training that came with it gave me the knowledge to be able to do what we do, because they give you the scientific data, the training that makes that machine work.
Mhm.
That machine's only as good as the technician that has the knowledge to run it, right?
Right.
And the same thing goes with ultrasonics and deionize. Um, uh, for instance, deionize, I've had a restoration contractor that says, "Hey, I just don't have the money." And he says, "Okay, you can actually buy deionized filtered water. And this is if I were to do it without state of the art, this is what I would do, and this is how I would do it. And this is a good starting strategy so that you can start that revenue. You could start making jobs make more sense, and then you can invest in a long-term investment like an ultrasonics or deionize."
You're able to actually, I think you were telling me at one point that you're certified to actually break down some of the electronics and do a thorough cleaning on the electronics and certify them as being cleaned. Is that through the fire line, or am I misunderstanding or misremembering?
Yes, it's through Fireline. Yeah.
Hmm.
So everything's tested before, and then after it's been disassembled, it's de-energized. The technicians are grounded by a mat as well as a wristband, and then they'll de-energize things like a capacitor or in a microwave or something that may still have charge, and then they'll thoroughly wash it with detergents and surfactants, and then rinse it with deionized water, which is anti-corrosive, and then it goes into a drying chamber, and it's ultimately restored. And then once the drying process is done, they'll reassemble everything and certify that it works, and run through a series of basically troubleshooting and tests, which just recently we really started getting very educated on that, especially with like microwaves.
Mm-hmm.
Very dangerous, and we just kind of got thrown into it. And so the knowledge, that's really what it is. I couldn't just take someone off the street and stick them in the deionized station of electronics and expect them to clean.
Right.
So knowledge is really everything.
Well, you invest in your workers, from what I've seen. You've invested in your workers for training, for certifications, and you keep your workers by paying them well, give them benefits, but also, they create a very good reliable. And I think you and I have talked about this before. It all comes back to the education.
Yes.
And the education is going to be what makes someone want to stay on. Plus, obviously, how they're paid. But from what I've seen of your operation, you've got people that have been with you for a while.
Yeah. I've always had this incentive where I'd give a $2 raise for every certification. I'd pay for the certification. I'd pay for your daily wages to, go out and get certified, as well as the class and lodging and all that. And when you have guys that take this serious, and honestly, the biggest reason for doing it, obviously not just education, but people that are really hungry to want to invest in their career, they're going to go get 10, 12 certifications. I've got several of them, and they're making top dollar in the industry, and it's beneficial all around to the insured, the customer, to the people that are underneath them, as well as the company in itself as an entity, because we have less issues, less errors, and we have less risks and liability because we know what we're doing.
Maybe it would help our viewers. What I know there's different types. So there's going to be upholstery, there's going to be smoke, there's going to be water. What are the general descriptions of those certifications? Can you run those down for us?
Yeah, so IICRC breaks them down into textiles, fire and smoke, and then water mitigation. And then within those categories of certifications, they have a amount of different certifications that are in each one of those categories. But one thing that I've learned, Corey, is there were certifications that I've just to achieve my ICRC triple masters thought, hey, you know what? This is something I'm not really going to use, right? Like carpet repair.
Right.
Like carpet I used to. Now I was trained by someone who was certified. And then you have that aha. The big thing is, man, where to start? Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. We had you got a little pixelated there. Are you hearing us?
Okay,
your mic is going in and out now. You still hear me, Corey?
I hear you good. I think Kyle's got an issue on his side. Kyle, can you hear us?
Is it my side?
Yeah, I think it's your side. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So
we can hear you now.
we're hearing you now. As I think your stream's picked back up, but it's a little pixelated.
Yeah, I kind of came in and out, so I lost thought of what I was talking about.
That's okay. I think that what we're trying to get is that most people have people just call their insurance company. The mitigator gets called out. Either they find them by, searching them, or they get sent out, and they get sent out by the insurance company. But there's different layers of how they get sent out. can you speak to the third party administrators that maybe, are the ones that are in charge of the mitigators between the insurance company and the insured, and give us an understanding of who they are?
Yeah, so third party administrators typically like a contractor that's reviewing the invoice of the mitigation contractor, and using industry standards or trying to use industry standards to justify your billing in a nutshell.
But people get called and they say, "Well, we work for your insurance company," but they might have been called out by, let's say, Code Blue. They might have been called out by Alacrity. They might have been called out by Contractor Connection. These are not necessarily, your insurance company. These are just administrators now that are being in charge of sending people out to deal with your problem. And you're familiar with those administrators that I just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in benefit of the carrier, because a lot of the third party administrators, they have boundaries and borders which they don't surpass. They have restrictions on the contractor that basically goes from the contractor to the TPA, the third party administrator, and then back over to the carrier. So a lot of even what is billable, or hasn't been done, or should be done, it really does fall on that contractor, even though they may have some red tape where they may not necessarily do the job properly.
Okay. How would you know that someone that's being sent out by your carrier or someone you called is qualified to handle your loss? What would you go through to verify that they are actually a qualified person if you were the homeowner?
Well, first and foremost, I'd want to know that that company's certified. So I would go to, or excuse me, licensed. So I would definitely ask for their contractor's license, and making sure that my contract will stand and be with it will be honored by California State or whatever state it may be in.
Hmm.
Um, but with certifications, I would simply ask. And again, as a customer, I would say to go with your instincts. I have tend to over talk and overshare and over educate because I'm passionate about this industry, and a lot of customers don't want to hear the whole science. And I get customers that go, "You're too analytical. I don't care. I trust you. I know that you're doing your job." So just talking with your contractor, I think you'll get a feel for, is this something they're passionate about, and whether that's a yes or no, how knowledgeable are they? Are they explaining some of these things? And a simple thing is every certification, or certified contractor, has certifications that you can recognize and you can identify and verify through a pocket card, a wallet card. Or you can go online and check for yourself or even call. I've done that several times where um, I've done litigation where certain things just didn't make sense, and they were claiming to be certified, and it just took a matter of a few minutes to realize they're not.
Right.
I mean,
I ran into that same thing where I was going to be meeting with a mitigator and their estimator. And I called. I didn't call, but I went to the iicrc.org site, and they have a chat option now. You might not get someone by phone, but there's an instant messaging chat. And I couldn't find anything that I needed to on this person. I saw the certifications in the area, but nothing that really gave me the information. I was able to put into the chat, "Hey, I'm trying to find out about this mitigator. Can you tell me if they're certified?" They go, "Oh, thank you. No, not a problem. Hold on." Moments later, they said, "Yes, they're certified in this, this, and this." "Great. Can you tell me who's the one that's certified?" "Yeah, sure. This person and this person." "Okay. Is this person that I'm going to be meeting, are they certified?" "No, I'm sorry. They haven't shown that they have any certifications yet." That told me everything I needed to know immediately without having any sort of delays. Now, I'm not sure if that's because I'm IICRC. I'm not sure if I was logged in. I'm not sure if that's available for the general public. But what you and I are saying is there are ways for you to verify.
Yeah, and you know what? If IICRC has that, that's a good feature to have, because it's going to hold our industry accountable for making sure that they they're obtaining that knowledge that should be standard. You should
Hmm.
not be in this industry and not have the knowledge. You're gonna get yourself in a world of trouble.
There has been for a while, for several years now, I think going back to 2019, an obligation within the state that those that are handling contents be specially certified. And I'm not sure what's happening with that from the Bureau of Household Goods in California. I'm not sure whether they're backing away from that, but it's been around, and you've been certified for a good long time as a certified contents person. Is that still the requirement with the state, or are they walking back from that?
I think that they might be walking back from it. I think people are tired of a lot of these laws and regulations for even things that really don't even apply in our industry. I get where they're coming from, and their thing is, hey, if a insured hires a restoration contractor and they pack out and possess all their belongings, and they decide, hey, I want a god awful amount of money, regardless of your insurance carrier paying or not, and I'm going to hold it ransom. And that was ultimately what the state's view was on this topic, where they required that you had to have your home goods moving license to literally move any of the contents. But I think that a lot of I've I know 3 people that have it, honestly, in all of California. I think it's just you have to go through so much crazy stuff um, in order to even get it. I mean, and it's honestly the same license that you'd need if you were an 18-wheel truck driver hauling something across America. And it's
Right.
just, I think that obtaining just a contractor's license in our industry is a huge hurdle for a lot of people.
Mhm.
So to have the knowledge or understanding that now I have to um, get a license for moving contents, um, I think people they're over it. I'd rather take the hit if I get caught, type of thing.
Is it required for a mitigator to be licensed as a general contractor, or is there a subcategory that a mitigator can retain and still have, a vendor status with the CSLB, the Contractor State Licensing Board?
For mitigation, I know that if you do anything to a structure, if it's over $500, you have to be licensed. And at the very minimum, you have to have a D64 C61 specialty license, where you have to pass the law and there's no trade. But that's to hold contractors accountable, to know what the rights are to their customers. Um, yeah.
We've seen that before where sting operations in California have occurred for people that are just kind of going door to door. I'm going to clean your tile. I'll use something more than soap and water. I'm going to use some sort of corrosiveness to clean your tile. And those people got stung as not as operating without a contractor's license. So it could be something as innocuous and something as small as just cleaning tile in your shower, and if it's more than $500 and you're using more than soap and water on tile, you actually have to have a general contractor's license.
But we're finding there's a conflict with that, Corey, even with amongst the city municipalities. I mean, I've had claims myself where I've addressed that same issue with not only the carrier but the city. And the city building department said, well, they didn't do any construction that required a permit. That's not the way the law reads. As Kyle said, the law reads anything over $500, then you must have a license for it. But that's the first thing. And then, speaking with many of these mitigators, that's the same language they use to the customer, that I'm not doing any construction, so I don't have to actually have this license. Now, what we find, and even out of one of the pack out companies that's out here, I won't mention their name, they're listing that they're cleaning with solvents, which again, as Corey just spoke, there was a swift sting operation from California enforcement that actually arrested several contractors for cleaning with cleaning solvent. It exactly talked about that issue. When we talk about the license and certifications, when we speak of, I'm sorry, the permit first, when we speak of the permit with the Bureau of Household Goods, I've actually received an email from one of my clients that had to file a complaint that indicated that the Household Bureau of Goods and Services do have jurisdiction over this, and that they were totally wrong in issuing her a letter saying that they did not have jurisdiction over this. And the chief of operations was going to, he was wrong about his decision of that jurisdiction and the letter that they sent out to the insured, and that this was being overseen again. I think a lot of that came from the fact, from a push that I had to send a letter out to a senator who actually wrote the bill on the pack out and the transporting of goods. So I addressed him about his particular bill, being, is it effective? This is your bill, and your department says they have no jurisdiction over it. And since then, it's took a twist because they were sending out letters letting people know that it was out of their jurisdiction, and now we've got a different feedback going, no, this isn't our jurisdiction, and we are going to investigate this properly like it's supposed to. Will it happen? Who knows? But allegedly, they are still holding jurisdiction over this matter.
I know it was the Woosley fire. They did all kinds of sting operations, and I don't know if it was just because it's a high-end area, or just the volume of affected houses and properties, but they were not only doing stings against contractors or unlicensed contractors, but whoever they sub to. And ultimately what the CSLB said is, if you're subbing to an unlicensed contractor that is not following the law, it's falling on you. So that kind of opened up a lot of people's eyes to, okay, well, maybe we should verify who we're subbing our work to.
Many of them don't seem to have licenses out here in the restoration business, and they think they keep saying we don't need it because we're not doing construction work. But when you're doing tear outs like you are at the home, and not more than even flood cuts, and you disconnecting plumbing and you're taking electrical loose because you're trying to mitigate the loss, you get into a lot of work that require a contractor. So that's one of the reasons I like what this show is about today. The certifications that mitigators need, because many people don't know that when they walk in the door and tell you, okay, we do this every day for a living, and then they'll even tell you the story that we're certified, as Corey said, which he's not certified, the company's certified at that point. When they use that misrepresentation, it's a misrepresentation. As one attorney would say, a misunderstanding. That's a misrepresentation. When you come out and say, I got certification, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm about to protect your house, and I'm gonna have my guys do A, B, C, and D, and then you find out this guy don't have any idea. And we see it all the time based on the type of restoration. I mean, mitigation is being done recently, and one that you're aware of that you don't know that's going on right now. But there's a concrete mitigation. I won't speak of the companies that literally went in and measured concrete measurements on a customer's floor. They did not bore test this in the beginning, and they told the insured that we don't do this until the end of the job, which means let's look at the rationale in that. Do you go anywhere and pay for something in the end? You don't pay for it now and get the results in the end. And they standing by that. And unfortunately, we've had people test behind this company to find out that the floors are still wet. And these are $100,000 plus bills that they're issuing out on these customers, and they don't know what's going on. And so again, my customers didn't know how to, know that this guy was legitimate or not. All they knew is that, hey, he said he's certified. And that's what they went off of. And now they got a $150,000 bill hanging over their head with litigations because, the floors are still wet. The carrier is up and down about still paying for it. They didn't realize, or they didn't agree that they actually owed for these damages because they couldn't even they couldn't get them verified. He didn't want to send photos. He didn't want to send anything other than saying, I don't normally do this until the end of my claim. That's untrue. For anybody in this industry, you have to support your loss. You don't say, I do the work first and then send it to you later. But that's what seems to be going on out here. And so I think it's important for customers, as Corey mentioned, you can go on IRCRC, you can go to their chat. There's different things, even with the concrete, that you can go to see if they're certified online to do verification and know before these people come into your house and do it, because that myth that the restoration company don't require a contractor's license is a fallacy.
Yeah, and we had our it's kind of a crazy story. We had our general contractor's license 2015, we did reconstruction. And it would just became such a fight with the insurance that we were pushing 4 kitchens a week at $40,000 of overhead. And we were doing everything entirely in-house. And so we let the license go. And 2018, we had a customer that wasn't a customer. And we bid on a job, and the CSLB called us and said, "Hey, look, you don't have a license." I'm going, "When did you need a license?" And I didn't know either. And it took 3 months to get a license reissued. And that's where I kind of learned, wow, no one knows about this. And if they do, they just, like the home goods license, they just don't care. Well, until I get caught. And ultimately, you're really putting yourself at risk, because the benefit of having a contractor's license is you have so many rights yourself. I mean, you can't even lien a property. How are you going to, I've got a large loss right now. It's been 8 months, and thank God for a lien. If I was an unlicensed contractor, I would have to go through a judgment process, and it's just, it's a mess.
One other question I have for you regarding some of these mitigators, especially when it comes to these certifications and things of that nature. Let's just say, for example, and it's just a general question. Let's say this certified individual, even if it was something that's going back to concrete, for example, the person is doing the testing should have to be certified when it comes to certain things, especially like concrete testing. Is that something you agree or disagree, or how would you associate that whole situation to the viewers to know that if I'm looking, if I hire somebody, I might want to ask for your certification directly because it requires this versus just your company. Could you please elaborate and tell us if it's truth to that, not quite truth, what you got?
We actually won a litigation case that I was on because the insurance had sent a resilient flooring contractor that wasn't water certified to do moisture tests and determine if the flooring had to be salvaged or replaced. And ultimately, that was the top of the onion layer. I mean, once we got to the core, I popped a tile, found mold, went a little bit further intrusive. We went ahead and did CETO probe testing and determined that the concrete was wet. It had been sitting. It was a slab leak on a hillside for 18 months with near surface alkaline reaction because as that water carbonated, it created spalling. All of the reinforcement rebar had rusted. And it resulted in a loss for the insurance because they did not send someone who's qualified. They were qualified to opine on the flooring, but as it results to water damage, he had no clue. And so, yeah, it's very important, whether it's an insurance carrier or it's a homeowner themselves. It's very important to know who's in your house and what they're performing. Are they knowledgeable in the trade? Do they have the certifications that meet the criteria that at least enough basic information to be industry standard?
Right.
I think we're seeing a new wave of understanding, and I was around in the '90s when mold was one of those things. Oh, we don't cover mold, but mold, blew up as being a litigated matter, and now mold becomes, a limited but covered peril or a covered part of your loss. And I'm starting to see that, having an adequately dried floor after a water loss is now kind of taking that same track. You can't put new material on a wet floor. And I think that there's a limited understanding by adjusters that, well, we took what's wet, we vacuumed it. What more do you want? I think what you're explaining, Kyle, by that litigation case, there's a lot more. There's a
Yeah.
lot more that goes into making sure that the foundation is dry after a significant water loss.
Well, don't forget, Corey, the other thing that they tell our customers that it's going to dry naturally or it's concrete. How could that possibly have
Yeah.
water in it that's going to cause a problem? It's concrete. And then you got to get to the understanding that obviously they don't know the difference. and that it can, that it does retain a certain relative humidity, and that flooring should not be installed, depending on the type of flooring that should be installed at certain levels of humidity. And so because of that lack of knowledge with these adjusters, that's where that misunderstanding we always say comes from. It's that doesn't make. I had an adjuster tell me I got 20 years of experience and I've never seen where concrete wouldn't dry. That's what she told me, and that's the loss that I'm speaking about with you on, Kyle. And now they've agreed to pay for the mitigation, but we're in dispute about how much. Now they hired a third-party company to come in and adjust it for it, and we know that they're not going to come back at no $150,000. It's less than 700 square feet of concrete to dry. So I don't need to comment on that. So, obviously we know that there's a couple factors in this. One, that particular tester is not certified. And then two, there's no way that anybody's going to pay a $150,000 bill for drying 700 square feet. And the reality of it is as of today, the floor is still wet, not to mention, some of the tests that were done, I won't say how accurate they are, but I can tell you that I've never seen any test results say that the drying process is drying at a 0.4 to 0.7 over one day.
Yeah, no.
Coming from an expert, what I'm saying? Impossible. Yeah.
In maintaining the water, you touched on it, saying that the alkalinity causes adverse reactions. So water being maintained in the concrete is not a good thing because it creates other reactions,
Corrosion.
secondary reactions. Is that a fair statement?
Well, here's what's crazy is, again, it goes back to knowledge, right? IICRC doesn't really touch too much on, they're very vague on concrete. They basically say, find an expert. If it's deep bound within the concrete or the foundation, hire an expert as a sub. So what I went ahead and did is knowledge certifications. I went past the threshold and thought, hey, there's a certification for concrete repair and moisture testing. It's a ASTM class in Indianapolis, and that changed my perspective on structure drying entirely. And it's a fight that I feel like I've helped pioneer. I'm at the tip of the sword because all my litigation right now is all concrete. I created a technical article that went viral in our industry. And the important thing is by getting knowledgeable and getting that certification, I have a completely new understanding as to concrete. And I've had crazy stories. I've had adjusters say, well, isn't concrete, doesn't it get wet in order to lay it? Isn't there water? And I go, so does the compound mud, but you don't see me not drying out everything in this house, if you want to look at it that way, or the surface water. And a big thing right now that we're having a push on is Ardex. Well, you can Ardex it. Well, you're absolutely right. But what you're failing to understand is this pre-loss condition? Is this residual high moisture content within the concrete? Was that there before the loss? No, it wasn't.
But by doing that, how is it actually? I mean, we seal the problem or encapsulate the problem. That doesn't do anything about what's still existing and below, correct?
It's a Band-Aid, correct. Yeah, one of the litigations that I was fortunate to be an expert on, I learned so much past beyond even my knowledge with geotech engineers, and learning that like the moisture retardant does only hold, it stops vapor drying, not moisture in a liquid form. And so when you have Ardex sealed over, which their threshold's 99% now is what they're claiming. The thing is if that moisture is still there, and let's say it's a slab leak, 99% of the time, what's gravity going to do is it's going to saturate the earth. It's going to saturate the soil. It's going to hit water table, and then it's going to come up to the surface once it's had that static pressure to drive that moisture up. Well, by sealing that, you've got one of two scenarios. It's going to sit saturated, and you're going to have a chemistry compound disaster where near surface alkaline reaction occurs, and it's cancer causing to concrete. It's cancer of concrete, and I've seen foundations that had to be entirely paid to remove and replace because of the negligence of its surface moisture. It's concrete. It's made to get wet.
Does that, when you mentioned about the soil issue of being wet for that long, does that change? And I have this answer. I'm just applying it to you. Or I should say, how does that change the condition of the foundation stability? Because now the compaction is now interrupted from originally where it was, because the soil is now moist. You know, what in your opinion causes additional damages or problems with that?
There's several. So obviously, one of the arguments within court was, is soil, the subsoil, a part of the foundation? And
Okay.
we were able to prove that it is. You don't just take a lot and just throw concrete on it. There's
That's
preparation within that.
That's right.
You have added material on top of that earth.
Gravel, everything. That's right.
Correct. So the argument was,
Good
should
point.
that be applied? Well, absolutely it should.
Good point. That's a great point. I mean, you know, again, for those listeners that may be public adjusters, need to take in what you're saying, because that's going to be their fight to understand that. You know, we get quite a bit of leaks from in the slab, or pipe breaks within the slab, or pipe breaks below the slab, which gets to be another scenario once it goes below the slab and it's in the ground, because of coverage of what's written into the policy. So, you know, it's always key to know the difference between in the slab and underneath the slab. So like you say, because now we're dealing with what is that surface level where it started. You know, like as you brought on, if you came out and it was new dirt, did they dig below that dirt to implant that infrastructure of that property? They did. But when they put it in that concrete, now it's part of that structure that went into it because it was built with that structure.
Correct. Yeah. Some of these insurances are treading on a thin line with some of their terms for their foundation. And we're getting a lot of success with, well, where does the house and dwelling and foundation start?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a slab leak and you're denying customers based on the location, and it may be just below the foundation, which I see a lot lately, but it's in the subsoil, it's still part of the foundation.
And, you know, would the argument be, how deep is your subsoil at that point? Because we, you know, again, we both know we leveling out. None of us were there when they actually excavated the property to know how much soil they, you know, how many cubic yards they put on there to level it out. So how, as an expert, would you help determine that for customers?
Core drilling. Core drill. Sorry.
That's a good answer.
Core drill. It's, you know what? Honestly, if you're a contractor, a flooring contractor, and you're following ASTM, you could never warrantize your work without verifying that there is a vapor retardant.
I agree.
Well, how would you possibly do that? I mean, you can, you know, look at historical data, or you can pull up basically the plans. But that to me wouldn't be good enough. I would definitely, no matter how big of a hole you have to do to verify that there is a moisture barrier system, there is so much vast knowledge in certifications. And when you really dive in deep, man, it gives me anxiety. I'm going, man, I've been doing this for 20 years. You know how many houses I want to call right now and redo, or just make sure my customers are okay? Because
well, I do got one last question for you regarding this. It's a claim that I have presently. I'm going out tomorrow to meet with one of the engineers that we brought on, which is Geotech, as you spoke about. We requested one to come out because I'll tell you the scenario of the claim without the claimant's name and customer's information. A city main broke outside their property. The property is on a hillside out in the Bay Area, and more than a million gallons flooded through the front of the house and ran all the way through to the back, causing erosion all around the property. causing concrete to buckle up and bend over and break throughout the entire property. You can see the concrete in the property inside the home that's starting to give, and now you're getting moisture. Smells of mold coming through the floors as well, which of course we know you got a lot built up back there. Prior to bringing out this geotech engineer, my determination, because I'm writing this loss, is that I saw at least 90% of the building that would have to be removed to make it right. And 90% we need to be taking down the whole entire building. My position of this is just the fact that, again, we're going to have unstable soil to build back on. And we need to have this soil tested because we got 1 million gallons that went into this property and it's hillside. And now we can see the erosion going on around it. What would be your position with I'm looking for full replacement, and we're bringing out this geotech to confirm my findings, because it takes it to another level of cost. Either we have roughly about $1 million in repairs, and if we have to tear this house down and build it, I wrote 2.5 million. So ideally, what would be your thoughts about a water loss so horrific with 1 million gallons of water going through a house on a hillside?
How long ago did this happen?
This happened about a year ago.
Okay. Is it still wet?
Yes.
Okay. First thing I would do is look at that vapor barrier, because what I've learned is, being that it's for vapor, not liquid,
Right.
It also has a pH threshold depending on what product it is. So in the event that that water travels through these minerals of soil, concrete, the pH is going to change. And the issue that you have is you can have eroding visqueen vapor barrier or vapor retardant. And that in itself is an affected material that has to be replaced. How do you replace it? It has to be all the same continuous, it has to be seamless. So in something like that, that'd be the first thing I would possibly do. I would do a pH test of the soil. I would do a pH test of the concrete. I would do impaction test and moisture test of the soil outside as a baseline as well as inside. I would go to an unaffected area that has the same kind of terrain, same kind of type of soil, maybe 3 miles down that we know wasn't impacted by this event, and find what the difference is. That be your baseline.
Okay.
It's a good answer.
Wow. That's a good way to set the baseline and the affected area. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, because you have to compare to something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going simply outside and you know that that's just as impacted as what's inside the foundation, you're not really getting the baseline that you need.
Got you. Because again, the whole property, like as you said, outside, all that got wet. Water, I mean, when I say ran through the property completely, all the way out to the back, where it actually shifted retainer walls as well. There was so much water. It ran for 4 hours at high pressure. And the city that's responsible for it doesn't want to acknowledge that, even though they wrote a letter. A manager from the city actually wrote a letter physically saying this was our fault, although they still don't want to accept responsibility, even though he himself said it was their fault. They couldn't find a shutoff valve. The city couldn't, and it ran at 4 hours at high pressure. And once they did get it turned down, it still ran at 10 or 15% pressure because they couldn't totally shut it down for some time. So the house took in, for sure, that we know of, over 1 million gallons of water, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That property.
And to a simple-minded person, they're thinking water in its form as far as what the effect is. Of course, water is wet. It's going to affect materials. But what you don't understand is the weight and the force that is with that and what that would do. And when you, like, if that was a litigation case, it was, I think it's 7 pounds per gallon of water. So you do the math on that, just the weight itself, right? So I would, to a jury, explain what that force is, explain what that weight is. Is something you said, what, 500,000 gallons?
1 million. That's 7 million gallons. Yeah.
7 million pounds.
Oh, right. Sorry. 7 million. Yes. Right.
Right.
Because it's 7 pounds a gallon.
Now, obviously not all that's going directly at a force towards the house, but the idea is that it's enough to destroy that house, shift foundation, shift, your stem walls and things like that. Yeah,
They were the only house hit on the block, and keeping in mind it was hillside, so I'm only assuming, because if we're looking at the 7 pounds of pressure per gallon, that may increase upon the downflow of gravity. Is that possible to
yeah,
more than 7 pounds?
yeah. And we had a job, just kind of to relate to, was a fire in Pasadena. It was a 3-story on a hillside, stilted house. And they used so much water that the soil had eroded. And this house, it was the scariest thing I've ever done. And it was probably stupid of me, but I had to go underneath the house to figure out.
Wow.
And it was a fire, by the way.
And it's eroding.
And it's eroding. And the structure, the post, I'm having with a wire brush and a scraper trying to see the popcorn charred wood, how deep it goes.
Wow.
With an engineer right beside me, and we're taking pictures, and you hear, I'm going, oh my God, this is it. This house is going down. I'm going down with it. But ultimately, what it took was, it took a geotech going out there and his analytical data, which we were able to take down the street. It was like 3 houses down. A neighbor was like, sure, go ahead, test whatever you want, to get the baseline that helped basically the structure engineer to where they had concrete post, and he had a specific remedy of how to salvage this house before it fell. And we were able to accomplish that. And it was so cool.
Wow. So it wasn't obviously on a slab, as people would know if you was underneath it. So you was
Partially.
under a crawl or partial slab. So you were able to reinforce and save that home.
Yes.
But wow.
Yeah.
Only because of the crawl space, I assume. Because how'd you get underneath the slab for resupport?
The slab was fine. It was actually not in the cause of origin of the heat line. Where the heat line was is actually where the columns and the posts were and the floor joists. And they put so much water that it saturated the soil where those columns were.
Wow.
So it took quite a few engineers. I think there was 4 total between the carrier and the insured, and we had brought out some ourselves. And it was nice to have, we all had the understanding that we were going to try to do something together, and it wasn't a clash of, let's not make this into something bigger than it needs to be. That whole story. It was nice to see everyone have the camaraderie of professionalism. Hey, let's get this done. Let's put all our knowledge together. Let's get it done. And ultimately, it took 3 years to get it done, but the house still stands, and it was probably one of my coolest accomplishments, honestly, just because I was under the house.
And he almost died.
Yeah.
With that dedication.
And the only way to get in and out of the crawl space is we had to cut the subflooring out, and we had a 12-foot ladder, and that's how we had to get in and out of that thing. And it was gnarly. Yeah. Yeah. And that job all started with wanting dry ice blasting. And when I got there, I go, lady, I'm not dry ice blasting. You want me to take more material off of what's holding this dang house up? It's not happening. And then as I explained what the conflict of interest was with doing something like that, and letting her know it's a lot more complicated than you think. This is a very unique loss, and opening her up to what she thought originally wasn't that big of a deal. Right? She thought it wasn't going to be that big, and if it were an unlicensed contractor or if it were an uncertified mitigator,
it would have been bad.
It could have been a totally different story.
I agree with that completely, because sometimes having those licenses and certifications make the world of difference in understanding. I mean, it's definitely a world of difference, and that's why they don't make it so easy to obtain either or. Here in California, there's less than 400 public adjusters in just whole state with millions of people, and yet other states have thousands of public adjusters in. And California just ain't for giving you that license to come out here and do anything unless you know your stuff. And that's really what it comes down to.
Is obviously there's the need, so it's not a competitiveness. So what reduces the amount of public adjusters in California?
I think it's the lack of education for one, and understanding. I mean, one, the test is extremely hard for most people to pass. There are requirements that is required here where you have either 2,000 claim hours already existing, or you have to earn 2,000 claims hours, or you have the option of taking on an apprenticeship for 12 months, which is equivalent to those 2,000 hours of claim hours.
Wow.
And then you have to pass the exam, and then you also have to take an online course online, and you'll give you credit for it up to the 20 hours that's required. And then every 2 years, it's like 24 CEs, I believe we have to keep doing every 2 years to keep reinstating the license. It's just that, for what I see, I think is the biggest of it is actually people realistically passing the test. I mean, it's a hard test. And I know people myself that scored in the 40s. And they're very educated with a master's degree. It's just a very hard test. But I think for many people, the reason it's so hard, and it's my opinion, is that if you're not in this industry and this is not a practice that you're doing on a daily basis, it's hard to understand what this is all about. You're just as lost as the policyholder reading the policy.
Yeah.
It's not enough understanding of the interpretation because you don't do this every day. And so it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So, for me, I was fortunate. I've been in the industry for, 3 decades of this insurance. I had a great mentor. I got to tell you, he on the line right now with us. He was one of the best mentors I could have asked for in this business, realistically, coming from being an insurance adjuster over to the PA side and, watching the different ways that it's done from the other side to help people and understanding how to really interpret the policies and support your claim was always the most critical part of this business. But I think that's the reason in California lacks a lot of public adjusters, is just because, again, one, many people don't know what we do. And then two, it just seems to be a little hard for them to get to that next level.
I see that same issue in restoration with contractors. I can't tell you how many contractors, they don't have the experience and they go get certified. And I could tell you personally, firsthand, I could take the same class 3-4 times, which I have. And every time I have an aha moment. Well, now that makes sense. The first time it was like a deer in the headlights. It was just, it's foreign, right? And I had the experience. And so I would have to look back and kind of relate and go, okay, well, that kind of makes sense why we do what we do. But certifications need to be more like a trade school, right? It really does. It needs to be more than a 3-day or 5-day curriculum.
I agree.
It has to be something that has to be applied out there and then come back and then we'll revisit it before you can get certified. I have so many friends and colleagues that I've even trained where and answer a lot of questions. And it's just, some of them are very simple, practical questions that they should know, but you're certified. So I don't understand where the disconnect is, right? And it comes down to, you can have a certification, right? But with that and experience is where you're going to get an understanding in a whole, as a whole.
I agree.
So I can see that.
Corey just finished educating an adjuster who came on board to a claim and expressed her truest credentials in IRCRC certification and how she assigned from the carrier to look at all these invoices to come over because she has these credentials and she's an expert. And I'm here to tell you, every time she said no turning over $30,000 later on. I mean, when everything she spit out, Corey batted it back over the fence at her and gave her the real deal of what the IRCRC says, not what she was anticipating, not what she was interpreting, and it was successful. I mean, it was truly successful in the push. But he was right. And the thing of it is, as you said, she went to the class, she took it. We all went to the class, we took it again. How much? I think a lot comes from experience, like you say, hands-on, just like anything else. And sitting there reading it in the manual, reading in the book, same as the PA, you only digest so much of that. and the understanding. It's like even in law school. I mean, you're in law school, but don't mean you could defend the case. You need that experience on how to reach in to get somebody else to change their mind. I explain to people many times that in our industry, we fight against insurance companies who's paid billions of dollars to either suppress numbers down to keep them low and keep costs down and defend against people like ourselves and policyholders that do claims for themselves. And they keep that cost down. And we come in and we're responsible for getting what you're truly entitled. And when we look at these, 200, 300, 400, 500% settlements from where they were, we can't even, right now, we can say truly that it's not about 2-3 times the amount. We bringing in settlements that's in the 200-400% time what they were originally paying. And it makes you just wonder how bad will this industry keep getting when it comes to even what we're dealing with now. You have a lot of these people out here that go through the process of getting certified to become better at their job, but you run across these carriers where they don't know diddly, no certification, and they shoot it down. How do one defend against that if you an insured and you hire somebody and they just keep shooting them down? How do you defend against it?
Knowledgeable people in the trade like yourself, hiring a public adjuster. Honestly, it starts with the contractor. If I can't speak for you guys, but I know in litigation it's a lot similar. If the contractor that starts this job doesn't start it with documentation, photos, moisture readings, it's just a huge hurdle, right? And I would imagine it's the same thing for you, but imagine how the insured feels. Oh my goodness, I hired X, Y, and Z, and now my livelihood of my home is at jeopardy because I have possibly hired the wrong contractor. And I think it's very important that people understand that. And I think that there is a bigger process. Like when I had first started, I got certified, but I didn't grasp that knowledge, right? And it took, there was sometimes you would have educated adjusters and they would just completely school me. And I'd go, man, I need to really understand this more. If this is something that I'm serious about, I'm going to get myself in a world of trouble, and I don't want that. And through that process, every time I'd get certified, and it may be a certification again, like carpet cleaning or let's say repairs, and I'm just a water damage contractor. Well, repairs, I don't do flooring contracting. I don't install, right? But knowing that, hey, you shouldn't be just pulling up the carpet or ripping the seams. And I could tell you 100 times I've done that. Hey, the carpet's wet and just right at the seams of the doorway. And now we're actually taking carpet kickers and we're professionally overlapping and removing it, right?
That's right.
So every class has its value for water damage. It may not seem like it when you sign up for it, right? But everything has its value. And with that time of experience and knowledge, one of the things that I've noticed is by doing things the right way, it is so hard to justify because with that it's built, right? I can't tell you our price went from $3,000 to on average price $6,000 for a basic residential house. And a lot of these carriers go because they're not used to that. They're not accustomed to that, right? They're used to the average guy that maybe have one certification.
1,500. Yeah, 1,500 out the door.
Right.
Put a couple blowers, put in a DU, pull some wet stuff out, call it a day.
I've never seen anybody charge this.
Yeah.
Oh, but you know what? Because in your career, you haven't had someone as educated as I am, doesn't mean that I should be held to the standards of the people in your past.
Right.
And that's the hard thing. That's probably the biggest hurdle with all this education and knowledge is it's not just me. It's all my guys. My guys, if you're new, I won't even let you get certified unless it's been 6 months to a year. And you better be really good by 6 months. And I literally will certify you basically myself or one of my project managers to where you can probably go in and just pass that test without having the class.
Wow.
But having them take that class as a reinforcement, and they go, oh my goodness, now I understand. And that's why I really think these certifications should be like a trade school. And we have a lot of success with that. In the past, I've had people that are WRT certified and don't really have the experience, and they fail at ASD. And it's because they're not grasping the real core curriculum of what's needed.
ASD meaning applied structure drawing.
Correct.
The follow-up to the WRT water technicians course.
That was probably the hardest class for a lot of my employees, my technicians. I think the most game-changing one would have to be health and safety, honestly.
Wow.
Health and safety was probably a turning point in how, I restructured everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot. It does.
Yeah.
But again, as you're speaking about, these certifications allow you to perform a lot more professional than many do. And it also gives you a better scenario of keeping your employees safe as far as that's concerned. And also your homeowners, even after the fact. I mean, a lot of people, we see mitigation company come in and just start cutting drywall without testing and not realizing they set an exposure off into the house for asbestos, and now you've created another problem for your customer. So, training like what you're speaking of is a great idea, so people know better than to do something like that. And again, even out here in California, we have the air quality districts that stipulate that if this place if a contractor determined that it's not totally safe, then he's required to do these type of things. But how do you try to get the carrier to understand that, who comes in here and go, it's not that complex. We don't even know you profit and overhead. It's just $300,000. What's not complex about $300,000?
Right.
And damage.
Yeah. But see, so with these certifications, the best way of explaining it is I like to test my abilities now, right? You have this newfound confidence, and I could tell you some wild, crazy stories. I mean, we just tried a Western, well-renowned, known chemotherapy and cancer facility, a medical facility that's scattered all over the West Coast, right? And a lot of restoration contractors, bigger companies, said, "There's no way you're drying that. We cut it out. We're going to cut it out, dry the studs, and rebuild." And it was a $580,000 job. And in order for me to sell it, I said, "Hey, not only can I dry this out in place in a medical setting, transferring the infusion into a USP clean room, but I'm going to do it in pass mold, or I'll do the job for free." And
wow.
It was the scariest thing I've ever done. And maybe I'm a thrill seeker. It was a gamble. And you know what? We did it. We passed. And it was so rewarding, right? Or a homeowner that has the medical conditions where they're literally allergic to everything, including the air. And I am happy that they got me. Right? Because I have that knowledge, that wealth of knowledge, to where the insured's like, "Hey, you're keeping my daughter alive. One screw up, you guys come in with lotion on your hands, my daughter's going to die."
Wow.
And it is so rewarding to be able to say, "Okay, let me step back, let me review some things, and this is how we need to accommodate your peril in your house with your daughter's condition." And we're in the middle of it right now, and so far everything is a complete success. And not only that, but we had the knowledge to address the insurance, who literally said, "I didn't cause the water damage, which was sewage, and I didn't cause the daughter's health issues. Basically, it's not our problem." And with that knowledge, and I actually consulted Maury on it, we need to do something. I don't feel comfortable even bringing technicians into a scenario like that unless we've accommodated her, which we were able to. We were able to get her an Airbnb. We were able to test the Airbnb to make sure that it was good enough for her to live in without having any kind of anaphylactic shocks or medical illnesses. And we were able to accommodate her in a way that 5 years ago I wouldn't have been able to do, because I didn't have that wealth of knowledge or the confidence.
That's a lot of confidence to put $500,000 on the table. That's
Yeah,
confidence.
yeah.
You
But
went all in on that, Kyle.
I
You went
started with
all
this
in.
podcast saying we got one of the best mitigators in the business. I started with that.
Well, it's funny because I rarely go on mitigation jobs unless it's a real serious, complicated loss, right? I do a lot more consulting. The company kind of runs itself. But when it came to that medical facility, my guys, they made a running joke. They said, "Hey, you haven't left this job." I didn't tell any of my technicians. I'm like, yeah, this $500,000 that I'm gambling with right now. I'm going to make sure it's done and it's done right and done in a way. I mean, we had a hygienist there 24/7, and he was sweating bullets. He's going, "Are you sure you're going to be able to do this?" And it was complicated because it was a 2-story loss, corrugated steel that actually had pockets of air with moisture in it. And then the lightweight concrete upstairs, we had to sand it down and we had to dry the concrete. And this is where the concrete class that's not even IICRC associated comes in with IICRC, ASD, and applied structural drying. And I took those two together and came up with a remedy to where we were able to restore that lightweight concrete on the corrugated steel. And the problem that we were having was we were drying the surface too fast, where underneath was full of water in the corrugated steel. So you've got moisture expansion on different levels. So it was causing concrete cupping and curling. So what we ended up having to do is I literally got back in that book and I had to refresh some of this knowledge that I've had and go, okay, this is what we need to do. So what we did is we would dry with a desiccant, 5,000 CFM desiccant for 8 hours. And then what we would do is we would turn it off and reintroduce moisture naturally so that we were drying it essentially not too fast or too aggressive on the top where we knew it was wet on the bottom. Because if not, it was going to literally just disintegrate. And we were able to dry it. And the engineer goes, "How the hell were you able to do that?" And you didn't even have to do anything because I wanted the corrugated steel to have some holes in it. And they're like, "Nope, not happening." So at one point, I'm going, "Man, I promised to dry this in place. What did I get myself into?"
You got yourself a big success.
You bought a $500,000 job.
Yeah. So my wife don't know about that one yet.
Not yet.
There's reasons, Kyle, that you're called by some of the biggest corporations. You're called by Amazon. You're called by Walmart. You're called by Kaiser Permanente. You're called by the City of Hope. You're called because you're the best.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Because you invested in yourself and you invested in your people.
And again,
we're gonna get concrete certified over here as well. I think Corey, Nate, and I think Victoria may be joining them next month, I believe, at
January.
over in
World
Las
of
Vegas
Concrete
certification.
Yeah,
I think
do that.
I'm gonna be picking it up next year myself. I have different plans for that date. And I'll be in Vegas at the same time as well. But I'm going to definitely join on to that. Corey and I have been talking about this concrete certification. Well, at least a year, Corey. You said, "Hey, you need to jump in it, Troy, to get on this for real." And so, I'm definitely going to, because I do have a lot of knowledge under, building as a builder for over almost 30 years. And then even understanding a lot of the mitigation side of this too. But I just want to, as you say, sharpen my tool. I want to know the ins and outs that I haven't been made aware of, and understand more of the science behind it, because we use a lot of science in this industry to fight our cases.
Well, taking it in Vegas, you have a lot better weather than Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It was so cold. It was freezing.
Yeah.
But when I went to the class, surprisingly, the class is a repair and inspection for moisture testing, right? But they looked at us like we were foreign, like we were aliens, because they had never had a restoration company go in there. And this is a company, an engineering company that literally has, we called it a compound. It's a good, probably their main building's like 400,000 square feet. And then they have all these compounds of bigger buildings that are probably 50,000 square feet. And all they do is testing, engineering testing, right? Everything you can think of, they do. They do water bathing, freeze tests. I mean, they have this machine that freezes 600 times in a week, a 5-day period, and then they'll go test it and find out the chemistry of it, or if it's brittle. I mean, everything you can think of, they do it. And we got a whole field trip of everything that was there, and man, it was crazy. But we were the only ones. And one thing that they didn't address, and they make a lot of these ASTM, the consensus body is there. For ASTM for a lot of these different materials, is not only were we the only ones there, but they had no remedy for how to dry or address drying. So everyone that was there were basically engineers. There was a few flooring contractors. There was a flooring manufacturer that was really cool to talk to. But our point of view in this whole class was totally different than everyone else's. We had questions that no one had asked before, right? And so it raised a lot of, well, we need to address how to properly test and dry in our industry. And that's ultimately what came of it, because there's so much knowledge that was never really addressed. And I would say IICRC or some of these other institutes where it seems as though it's not standard. And it is addressed in IICRC. I found it in there. I think it's the 2015 edition. It says you need to dry concrete if it's deep bounded within the concrete. And that was very interesting to go to a class that helps you address finding the problem, but not having a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this program is to the International Concrete Repair Institute. Is that the right one?
Correct. Yes. And the one that I took was American Testing Engineering out of Indianapolis. Amazing group of guys. The walkthrough, the field trip was like an hour and a half long, and we didn't even get to see everything. And they do utensil strength on, I mean, literally you could take anything there and say, this is what I want tested. This is the issue I'm having with it. And they'll identify what the problem is, no matter what it is. Plastics, polymers, they do shotcrete, everything. It was pretty cool. Yeah. And then our last day there, Indianapolis has one of the biggest textile museums.
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
We spent, me and my project manager, Mike, 8 hours in that thing. And the going joke is we kept getting lost. It was that big. I mean, I think it's massive. But being able to see pottery and different types of textiles, hand loomed, I mean, just you name it, it was all there. And it was like being in a candy shop, just mind blowing to see some of these things and go, man, I've seen that before. I had no idea that's what it was. I definitely didn't handle it like I should have. So that was something I took back from that class as well, was while we were there, we were able to go to a museum and actually talk to historians and things like that. And they're like, yeah, you didn't handle that right. And so I go, okay, well, I'd really like to really dive further in knowledge in contents, being able to do taxidermy and things like that. So we slowly started educating ourselves and taking, certain classes or seminars on just things that you may never use, but you have it just in case it's there.
Right.
That's fact.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on our show today, Kyle. You have been so informative. You've actually educated me even on some things I've heard you say that will make me more aware of some, what I'm looking at when I come across it. And of course, as I say, we continue to get certified over here for a lot of things in the industry that's required to know and understand. I mean, we only as good as we can advocate for, and, we only good as what we know. And that's the problem that we see, that we differ from many PAs, because many of them can't even write an estimate. Corey and I, we write our own estimates in-house. Everything is written in-house from us. Even most of 90% of our testing is all done within house. So we know the answers to the fight before we get in here. And so, it gives us a better way to advocate by having the real answers than guessing along the way and finding out you're wrong down the line, 6-7 months down the line. It just wasn't correct. You're trying to restart the pace. So we do appreciate everything you've come on board to tell, the people, and even Corey and myself. We appreciate you here in the industry. We respect your knowledge. We respect your education. And your certifications is off the chain. I wish I could just show people what those would be, and they'd probably fall out of their seat, just to kind of give you people an idea. This guy got a resume that goes, a certification that goes beyond a whole page. Every line is all the way to the bottom. It's just no touching, Kyle. So we appreciate you, Kyle. You earned your worth, man. You really did.
Thank you.
We hope that, what you've given the people today will give them some idea. I know some people don't like the analyticals, but I got to say there's a lot of people that do want an understanding. They want clarity. And so we thank you for that. Corey, as we always do, we leave with a thought of the day, and this is where you come in and share your thought behind what we've had our discussion about. So after you.
I think the thought of the day is going to be, in order for you to be your best advocate, you need to take a pause and read what you're being presented and question what you're being told. In order for you to understand what you're going to get yourself into, you can't be rushed into it. And any sort of expert has to have validation, verification, certification. You can find this. You just have to be willing in order to put yourself out there to be your own best advocate.
Couldn't have said it better. He leave with some great today. With the word of the day, he always leave a great that make even myself go, couldn't have said that better. So I have to say it. Well, we thank you a lot again, Kyle. We're going to sign off today again. Just thank you for joining Claims Underground. Signing off, Troy Willis.
Corey Locke, and we thank you so much again. Thank you, Kyle Herndon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Claims Underground podcast. We hope you enjoyed this segment. If you need more information on insurance policies, feel free to check out our website, www.claimsunderground.com. And remember, when the insurance companies won't pay, we're here to help. Until next time.